Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Ben Monder. Ben Monder is a guitarist who's based in New York, and he has literally hundreds of albums as a sideman, but also some really special solo records that he did as a leader. Otherwise, you might know him from the music of Maria Schneider's orchestra, his duet with Theo Bleckman, Guillermo Klein's Los Gauchos, Paul Motian's band, or the last album from David Bowie. So welcome, Ben. It's good to have you.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me, for your interest.
My pleasure. So we've already talked a little bit about this, but it's tradition on this show to basically ask the guests about their coffee habits a little bit. So could you tell our listeners about...
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did have an email exchange about coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what the contents of that exchange were, but that's pretty easy because my habits are very consistent. And I'm not a coffee snob at all. Nothing against coffee snobs. I respect,
Mm-hmm.
good taste in all things, but I just pretty much drink 95% of the time just Bustelo.
Mm-hmm.
Tastes fine, does the job, wakes me up, provides the inspiration when it's needed. So, so I have like a 4-cup Mr. Coffee machine. I'll
Mm-hmm.
make a pot of that, drink that in the morning. I mean, it's not actually 4 cups, it's like 1 cup, 1 large cup and a little bit. But so that'll happen. And then almost always I'll have another, maybe around, from, of course, if I'm home, if I'm out, I'll go someplace out. But I'll have another one at some point, generally early afternoon. And as much coffee as I drink, and as long as I've been doing it, if I have anything, like after like 4 or 5 p.m., I'll be up all night, which is weird, but so I got to get that second one in before that. So there you have
it. Is there ever a point where it negatively impacts your left hand?
Maybe that's what's doing it. I know, definitely not. It's only ever had positive impacts on anything I can discern.
Well, that's awesome. I find that,
I get the jitters sometimes, but I'll get those anyway. So,
gotcha. I get very jittery from it, so I'm. I wish that I didn't get jittery and I could play better on coffee. Anyway, I just wanted to start with that to get a feel for your coffee habits. So I was thinking about your sort of brand of guitar playing, and the way that I've described it is like you're in a lineage of exhaustive guitar players. And what I mean by this, to go on a quick...
Exhausted or exhaustive?
Exhaustive.
Yeah.
Just in that you sort of have a systematic method of growing your vocabulary. And I think this is exemplified in basically like when I was a freshman at USC studying guitar, I was totally unhappy. There was like, one of the first classes was sitting around playing fucking Cantaloupe Island in this like guitar circle jerk. And I was like, what am I getting myself into? And so I sent you an email and I was like, please let me study with you. And the email that I got back was literally more useful than the entire time that I spent at USC. And I wanted to get into that, what I'm calling the sheet. And basically you get into sort of like these permutation things. And it seems like you sort of have like a generator function that provided you with a lifetime of stuff to work on. So how long have you been working on this same set of techniques?
Well, it's cumulative, but I've had the more or less same approach, which is, sort of methodical and systematic from the very beginning. Well, maybe not the very beginning, but basically the inspiration came from Chuck Wayne, who you may or may not know, but he's a legendary guitarist in bebop lineage. And I took lessons with him when I was maybe 16, 17. and he was all about having a very thorough, systematic approach to jazz harmony. And I think that's what inspired me to go that route of just being exhaustive, as he put it, and organized. And so at least, half of that sheet comes directly from the lessons that I learned from Chuck. And then I added a little bit more, but in a similar vein. Like, for example, for some reason, he provided me with like 4 voicing types for 7th chords instead of 6, which, would include all of them. For some reason, he neglected a couple. Which ones I can't. I don't have the terminology because I never remember the Berkeley terminology.
I would hope that you wouldn't.
No, I wish I could, because I don't know how else to describe those voicings other than like drop 2 and 3, drop, etc. But I just can't learn the rules. I never remember that.
Yeah.
But whatever. Anyway, so he gave me like 4 out of the 6 types, and then I just added the second 2.
Gotcha.
But anyway, it sort of provided a template for systematic learning in whatever topic I was delving into. And I got a lot out of the Mick Goodrick books, from The Advancing Guitarist all the way through, his later tomes, Almanac for Voice Leading, and those are extremely methodical as well, and exhaustive. There's nothing more exhaustive than that Almanac.
I feel like in this lineage of guitarists, there's maybe Mick Goodrick, and Ted Green, and who else was I thinking? Like, John Stoll, to some extent, Alan Holdsworth, and then there's kind of this post-Monder school of like, Miles Okazaki and Ryan Ferreira. Is there anybody in this sort of lineage that I'm forgetting about from the earlier years, I guess, besides Chuck Wayne, I guess?
Sorry, you were sort of freezing in the first part of that question, so.
So basically, I'm thinking like, Ted, Mick, John Stoll, Alan Holdsworth. Are there people in this exhaustiveness lineage that I'm forgetting about?
Oh, probably. So you mentioned Ted Green, I think, whose chord chemistry was kind of a Bible of mine from a long time ago. Maybe Joe DiOrio, had him in there. I'm sure if I thought about it harder without a camera on, I'd be able to think more people, but I'm sort of drawing a few blanks.
Yeah, no worries. Well, cool. I mean, I guess I'm curious about some phases of practice in your career. First of all, recently with all this coronavirus stuff, have you found that you've sort of been in the corona woodshed?
Oh yeah, very much.
So more practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not even practicing as much as I'm writing mostly solo guitar pieces and then practicing them, because they're I'd like to get them in some kind of shape. But if they ever let us into a recording studio again, I'd like to be able to document them sooner rather than later. So I've had some things lying around and sort of half finished, and I've taken this opportunity, since I have literally all day, to finish them and to get them into shape. And it's sort of speeded up the process, I guess, of getting this next recording project out there. But I haven't practiced like in my, I guess, previous pre-COVID life. My practice was more geared towards, learning improvisation techniques, and I've been doing almost none of that. So I haven't been practicing my chords, or I haven't even picked up. I think I practiced with a pick maybe twice in the last 6 weeks, and it felt so bad I just put it away again. So yeah, so I have some other shedding to do when the time comes, but I'm just really motivated to get these pieces finished and playing shape.
Nice. And I heard in a different podcast you were talking about one of these being sort of derived from the Goodrick stuff with the 3 voices. Is that one of the things that you're working on?
Yes, yeah, a couple of them are actually.
Awesome. I'm glad that somebody's still focused on Mick Goodrick.
Oh yeah, I'll be focused. I mean, so far I've only been dealing with the 3-note voicings, which is a relatively minuscule fraction of this entire thing. So yeah, that'll be a constant with me through probably the rest of my life.
Cool. So compared to something like leading up to 2005 when you put out Oceana, what did that sort of era of practice look for you like?
Leading up, I mean, it's been the same more or less for forever. There's the ideal practice routine, which almost never actually happens in real life, and then there's what I do, but it's some sort of approximation or compromise between my aspirations and reality. And I actually put practice schedules on my wall, which are generally impossible to complete, but it just makes me feel better having them there, and that means it goes along with the whole systematic thing, like 1 through whatever 10 thing. That said, I do advise people to focus on fewer subjects per day and be more thorough and more exhaustive with them. So if I say like I list 1 through 10 things, that's maybe not the wisest thing on earth.
Can you give an example of what like a few days of practicing would look like? Like what you have scheduled for yourself and what you actually end up trying to tackle?
Yeah, I'll generally start with chord work. So I used to practice. It used to be that the first thing I would go to when I picked up the guitar were reading through Bach chorales, or not like sight reading through them, but figuring out how to actually play the 4-part chorales on guitar, which is usually like 90% doable. The way that they're actually written. There's just they're finding some sort of non-guitaristic ways to solve those problems. And those are, first of all, it's a great thing to hear first thing in the day. And lessons in just counterpoint and voice leading harmony kind of endless. So I'll do that, and then I'll do 2 or 3 hours of chord work, starting with triads. I mean, I don't know what detail you want me to get, but there's lots you can do with triads.
I have no interest in appeasing the layperson. This is like I want to get as deep into the weeds as I can with you.
Okay. Well, voice leading triads through cycles, like books, and figuring out practical ways to actually improvise with them over changing harmony and over static harmony. Finding inner voice movement with through triad cycles. There's a lot of the George Van Epps harmonic mechanisms book that goes into like inner voice, neighbor tones and passing tones. In triads, and so exploring those, just pretty much every possible thing you could do with, and also of course there's all the inversions and playing open, closed positions and different voices, different spacings.
Mm-hmm. So how many hours? How many hours? Sorry.
Yeah, this is a little bit off topic, but I have attempted, since I read the first person that introduced this idea to me was the great bass player Retso Harris. He said that at least once in your life you need to practice for 24 hours, and it'll change your life. So I'm like, all right, I'll take that challenge. So 3 separate times in my life I've attempted to do this, and I've failed every time. I just fell asleep. Like I haven't done it. And also reading, I think Ravi Shankar has a couple of autobiographies, but I read one, like I think the first shorter one, where he talks about a sort of a rite of passage, like every Hindustani musician goes through a 3-day practice binge,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you want to call it. Like and if I'm remembering correctly, I think he had to play the same. He was just playing the tabla, the same tala, for 3 days, and his teacher and other people would sit outside of his hut to make sure they didn't stop, and they would spell each other. So, anyway, I guess my point for saying that, like, I think the closest I got was like 22 hours, and I'm just like asleep. I just remember that at the end of that, I'm on my floor, the guitar like on my stomach. The only thing I could do was like practice like slow quarter notes to a metronome. So I had the metronome on like 3 beats per minute, and I'm trying to accurately play 3 beats per minute with the click, and like I'm sort of like falling asleep between beats. Anyway, it didn't end well, and I just like conked out. But my point in bringing this up is when I feel like when I have like an ocean of time in front of me, it's really liberating, because I know that I can practice every subject. I don't have to impose a time limit on it, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I could do triads for 3-4 hours, and there's 3 or 4 hours a day in that. If you practice everything in every key, and I mean, just think about it. You could probably practice triads for 8 hours. Not that that's advisable, but
well, 24-hour practice marathon, that's something I should aspire to.
I mean, I don't know how healthy it is, but you know what? Let me, sorry to interrupt, but the first time I did it, even though I didn't make it, I think I made it like maybe like 20. I felt like my playing grew like exponentially just from having done that, and I felt like for like months I felt the after effects of it. Didn't happen so much in the other times, and I don't know, maybe I'm just getting too old for this nonsense, mm-hmm. But I felt like maybe it was, I don't know if it was detrimental, but I felt like my fingers were like stiff and like swollen and whatever. I don't know if I'm going to try it again, but if I did, this would be the perfect opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Anyway, so getting back to the ideal practice schedule, like 4 hours of chords, one topic. I mean, I talked about triads, but there's lots of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe the plectrum is trying some stuff with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to write. I feel like it's kind of something I need to keep up, or just kind of like lose my motivation for it. So there's always some of that. And then there's, of course, just like practicing the pieces that I'm actually trying to ever perform.
Mm-hmm.
So, That's a day. A friend of mine suggested a few years ago something really helpful for me, which was just, because I was saying there are all these things I want to get to, and I never seem to have enough time. And other life things get in the way, food, or changing cat litter. So he said, just set an egg timer. This is probably before the iPhone, where you have a timer on your phone, but just set a timer, like, I want to do this subject. I want to make sure that I do it. So I'm just going to set an hour, not going to be distracted. I mean, one thing that helps is just put your devices away when you're practicing. So the quality of your practice will be the highest level. And just, set, I guess you can't really set your iPhone timer and have your device be put away, but so maybe get the egg timer after all, although the ticking might be a bit distracted. Anyway, you get my point.
Yeah.
Shut up.
What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so you mentioned food in there briefly, I think, and that makes me think back to probably when I was in my heyday of practicing, and I realized that the number one thing that was stopping me from getting better at guitar was just getting my food and eating together, and just not being hungry. And there's sort of this ascetic thing of being a jazz musician who's trying to practice all the time and forgetting to eat and stuff. And so I'm curious how you feel your practice sessions in terms of food. It was a kind of ridiculous question, but I'm curious.
Some kind of romantic idea of you need to feel hungry all the time and forget about anything.
I just get lost in it and realize, I need to take care of my body and stuff.
Yeah, I've never forgotten to eat. I mean, if I haven't eaten, it's not for lack of being aware that I'm hungry.
Okay, fair enough.
But a little off that question. I mean, the kind of food I eat can kind of directly impact how I feel about playing. And when I've gone, I've experimented with a non-gluten diet before. My doctor told me that was a bunch of bullshit. If you don't have Crohn's disease or something. But when I actually did that, my hands felt way better. So yeah, the time that my hands felt the best, because I do have I struggle with some hand issues, just feeling stiff, or like I mentioned before, they get swollen sometimes. They don't move very well, especially in maybe the last 10 years. The times that they felt the best were when I've fasted. So a couple of times I've done this sort of cleansing fast where I would just eat. I mean, I would drink, I guess it was 6 glasses of organic apple juice a day mixed with powder. It's supposed to clean your colon out or something. I'm not saying to do that or that it's valid, or I don't know, but that week that I did that, my hands never felt better. I was just felt as unencumbered as possible. So your diet could have a really direct impact on how you feel about playing.
I guess for me, it was a matter of just sort of blood sugar spikes and learning how to control that, because it was just too much of a distraction. And I don't know. I was just curious, what your take on that was. But so this sort of is a good segue into my next question. And when I was in college, there was a decent amount of Ben Monder lore, and somebody once told me that Yeah, no, I mean, like, I was a deep Monder head, and there were a
Okay.
few of us, but somebody mentioned something about you going to like a 10-day silent retreat, which now I don't think of as anything crazy. But have you ever done like a meditation retreat, and do you have a meditation practice at all?
Well, yeah, I did do the, Vipassana course back in 2002. I only did one. Um, I mean, it was great. I should do another one. I don't know. I feel like it was in 2002 was a little bit easier to clear my calendar for
Hmm.
that amount of time. Um, do I have a meditation practice? I mean, yes and no. I'm not as consistent about it as I used to be. But you know, it's the cushion's right there, right to my left, waiting for me to sit on it. um,
Do you feel like practicing is sort of your meditation in some respects?
yeah, at its best, sure. Um, but it's not meditation. So
Hmm.
I wouldn't say that it's a replacement.
It's kind of funny to me that, like a detail like that about your life can make its way to some dweeb in California studying guitar. That being me.
um, yeah, I don't know what to say. It's
Right.
interesting.
Cool. So I wanted to ask some questions about your compositional approach. I think I read once that you had this epiphany about it being all about sound. Can you elaborate on that, or do you recall saying that?
I don't know what's all about sound. It with a capital I, or
Like
like
I think I remember
composition. Uh,
you had like an epiphany about the importance of sound. Maybe I'm misremembering,
oh
but
well, yeah, sure. I mean, actually, I remember this. I probably talked about this in an interview many years ago, but I do remember specifically listening to like a cassette. I'm in, Jack McDuff's truck, tooling across the country, and listening to, you know, probably pretty high at that point, and listening to Egberto's Monte on my headphones, and just thinking like that's it. Like it's all there's nothing. It doesn't. Nothing exists outside of sound if you think about it. Um, and the relationship you have with that sound kind of determines how well you can convey your ideas. Um, I wouldn't say that ties in necessarily to composition, like the technique of composition, but certainly the performance and
mhm.
purveying of compositions.
Do you remember what Egberto you were listening to?
I think it was the solo, his record Sinfonia, which is like a double record, and one LP is solo guitar. Well, solo various instruments, mostly guitar, and the other is quartet. So I was listening to the solo half of that.
Gotcha.
Um, and it's just a sound world. Um, sorry, but you wanted to follow up with the composition.
Sure. That quote about sound makes me think of like a tune like Windowpane, and I'm sort of curious. Like that's one of those tunes that you didn't really write out, right?
I didn't. I mean, I have subsequently written it out so that it could be published in this book, which was extremely tedious process, but I did it.
Mhm.
Um,
So how does a tune like that sort of come into being? Since the compositional process doesn't seem to be on paper, like it sort of seems to self-organize out of something. Can you elaborate on what that's like?
Um, as most of my tunes originate, it just comes from some random idea. In this case, what do I do with this specific picking pattern, which it turns out is like Bill Lobo's etude number 1, but I didn't know it at that time. And that's the first tool I had, I guess. After that, I don't really remember what I was thinking, but you know, I guess there were some like, you know, just playing around with the guitar, things, you just accidentally hit upon things like this hammer-on thing. So, okay, that sounds cool. What can I do with that? I don't know. I guess at some point you have to make a decision on, okay, I have this picking pattern or finger picking pattern. It kind of results in sort of a wash of sound. What character do I want to give this piece? Is it going to be bright or dark or both? Or so, you know, in that case, I settled on something relatively bright. Kind of folky. It's probably something that it's not an emotional place I would probably go these days because I'm just not feeling like that. But I still try to play it once in a while with varying degrees of success, or I should say varying degrees of failure. To be accurate.
A question about Windowpane that I can definitely edit this out and I'll ask it sort of cryptically, but does the title Windowpane imply what I think it means?
Yes.
Oh, Ben, I'm so happy that I've resolved this question in the back of my mind.
I hope you, yeah. Well, I hope you won some money on that or something.
Some money? What?
No, never mind.
Yeah, as if I was betting. No.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. Cool. Well, that all makes sense.
I'll probably refrain from going into any more detail.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Cool. Well, so with something that's a little bit more like through composing.
You're kind of young to know about that. I mean, do they still have that? Is that still a way that such a thing is transmitted?
I mean, I consider myself sort of like, I mean, like I research this type of stuff. I mean, like as a little side hustle, I make weird little supplements and like, you know, cognitive enhancement pills and stuff. So I'm very deep in this shit. So yeah, and I'm not sure if you're
history.
Yeah, a little bit. Are you familiar with the band Coil?
Coiled?
Coil?
No.
They're like I think they're sort of associated with like Throbbing Gristle and like these very esoteric sort of occult oriented you know, practices, and they have a song called Windowpane, and it's all about like put a window pane in your eye. And I mean the implication is LSD, but
yeah, but you can't really do that because then it would be droplets.
Yeah,
I knew people that put droppers in their eyeballs. Yeah, that's pretty effective. They're all in institutions now. I'm just kidding.
Well, that's I'm so tickled by this whole conversation. Well, I won't make you say any more, but
that's okay. I could tell you about the whole trip if you really want.
Okay. I mean, anything you're willing to tell me.
No, that's
all right. Well,
leave it at that.
Sure. So with something like Hydra or Oceana, which are these very complex through composed tunes, what does generating that look like compared to like a solo piece that doesn't require bringing in anybody else?
Oh man, they're not super different because I'm pretty much writing on the guitar. in both cases. But the band piece is just like I'm conceiving of more going on, and so I'm sort of like, as I'm writing the guitar part, I'm envisioning a melody line, which is usually song idea. Um, and I'm hearing some rhythmic propulsion and etc. But it's not a substantially different process for me. I don't know. I kind of suck at talking about the way I compose. There's just kind of like,
it's all good. I mean, when you bring in like a bass player, I assume that you have to write out their part. Like they aren't just.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's no like learning my stuff by ear.
So with like Oshna, would you essentially have written your part on guitar and then you write out a bass line, or like is everything written out at some point at the same time? I mean, it sounds like you put together
more or less at the same time.
Gotcha.
Or sometimes I'll write out the guitar part first, and then I'll. I mean, it's never a great idea to have a fully formed guitar piece and then like try to find a space for the bass.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe it's complete, like you've envisioned it as complete. So, but sometimes the bass will just provide a supporting role to what's already there, or sometimes there's actually room for an independent voice.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more. That's more in the case of Hydra. That's the case. If I remember right, Oceana's. It's more of a supportive role of like what the guitar part is already doing.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, so in one of these podcasts, I think it was the Everybody Loves Guitar interview that you did,
Mm-hmm.
and he was asking about like, sort of like peak musical moments, and one of them, you said like basically just like those moments that everything's flowing perfectly and you're reaching like 80-90% of your potential. So when I was in college, I came across this bootleg of you and George Garzone playing at Cornelia Street Cafe, and you played alone together. And I remember being in a practice room listening to this a little bit high and just being like, "What the fuck is this? Like, this is absurd." Your playing was like literally liquid; it was just everywhere. And so, did you consider this a sort of peak era for your playing, or do you go beyond this?
I wouldn't say there were any peak eras.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, looking back, I feel like I was playing a lot better back then, like just as far as like playing the guitar. Let's say maybe I felt best like around the age like 39 or 42, and sort of like steadily downhill from there. But I actually remember that gig. I remember not feeling like fantastic on that one. There was another gig I did with them that I remember feeling like there was a lot more flowing with among everyone, which was I sat in with the Fringe, which was like like a fantasy come true, because I've loved that band since I was a kid, and I was able to play one night with them, maybe around 2003 or so at what was the Zeitgeist Gallery. Yeah, that's what it was called back then. But who knows? I mean, it's like what things feel like subjectively doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really count for a whole lot. But those peak moments are pretty few and far between, but they do happen. I mean, if they never happened, I would really question, why am I even bothering to do this? But since I know it's possible, I just keep throwing myself out there and just trying.
Hmm.
or not trying, or trying not to not try, or whatever frame it. Going for that
Hmm.
experience.
Cool. What have you been listening to lately?
Well, since I've been writing, like, and practicing these pieces, like I said before, for like many hours per day. I'm not like in an intensive listening mode,
Hmm.
right? I was listening to, I was spending a lot of time listening to the Elliott Carter string quartets, mainly number 3, like 1 and 2, got to know pretty well. Number 3, I just found this really amazing recording. Out of like maybe the 4 recordings of his quartets I'm familiar with, this is my favorite, the Pacifico string quartet. So I was really getting into number 3, which is just kind of just mind blowing. I have no idea what's going on. I completely love it. So I was listening to that. Also came upon a really great recording of the Schoenberg string quartets by the Fred Sherry Quartet, and I started really getting into number 3 and 4 of his. And I bought the complete Brian Fernie quartets. Again, I mean,
That new complexity.
so I was just kind of like in quartet world for a while. But after I really got into, I kind of haven't had the mental space to listen to to give it its due, music that complex. So I've been mainly listening to metal.
Yeah, one of the people that I mentioned I was interviewing you to, it was like, yeah, ask about Morbid Angel. I hear that he likes Morbid Angel.
Oh, that was an early one for me. I haven't.
I feel like it's a little bit simple for you.
Well, simple is fine, but the last Devourment record, which was I think from 2019, is ridiculous. So I just bought that, enjoying that greatly.
I haven't listened to Devourment since I think it's Butcher the Week.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, they're all. I don't know, they're all good, but this last one I think is their best record.
To check it out.
Yeah, the last 2 Portal records I just got. Do you know? You're familiar with Portal? They're from Australia.
I am, yeah. They're related to like Cynic or Cleric or one of those bands.
Right? Related in what way? I mean, they're sort of,
like members from. I feel like it's members from Cynic. Right? Oh,
I highly doubt that, since they're Australian. I mean, I don't know exactly, but I don't think so. Anyway, super dark. What else?
I mean, obviously Gorguts.
Oh yeah, I'm just talking about things that I like just bought, But,
oh, gotcha. Okay, cool.
I mean, Obscura, it doesn't really get better than that.
Totally. When you're in like a deep listening mode, what does that look like? Like, are you listening on big speakers? Are you listening in headphones? Are you like running errands? Are you?
No, not running errands.
You're like deep in it.
Oh yeah, that's the only way to listen, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't want to be distracted or doing other things. Like, I still try to recapture that complete immersive experience that made me love music to begin with. I don't want to ever lose that, as distracted as everything kind of is now. I like to carve a space for concentrated listening.
Mm-hmm.
So either, either on speakers or probably more frequently these days on headphones, but like headphones coming directly from my, like a tube power amp. And because I live in an apartment building, and I'd like to listen to something loud enough, but I don't want to disturb the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
They don't seem to really mind disturbing me as much as possible, but so that's for another podcast, the Tenants podcast. But yeah, headphones is good. Remember when I was a kid, I used to like lie on the floor and put one speaker on one side of my head and the other speaker on the other side of my head. Music that was like sort of a headphone. So
Have you ever done the sort of Ives thing of like trying to listen to two things at the same time?
No.
I think Charles Ives' dad made him listen to two songs at the same time.
Yes. No, I'm aware of the folklore about that, but I haven't done that. Although, you know what, I've heard a couple of things. I would like put two, I can't remember which pieces they were, but they went together really great. It was like there was well, it doesn't even matter who they are, but I was listening to George Friedrich Haas. He's like a microtonal composer, really great stuff. He has like a bunch of string quartets, as well as a lot of other stuff. But remember, so I just put this on like YouTube. I put one of his quartets, which is, relatively sparse, and then something else at the same time, and they worked so well together. It was like, just like formed this piece. I don't want to say like it improved. I hope he doesn't ever watch this, but
I don't think anybody will. So
yeah, hopefully.
Speaking of microtonality, the last person I interviewed is a guy who's kind of like he's a theorbowist and a guitarist, but he's
a whatist?
A theorbist, like the
Theorb?
giant it's like a giant lute, like a theorbo.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
I think you go along with this dude, but he's coming out with a line of these microtonal guitars where the neck is interchangeable, or the fretboard rather, and it's just attached by magnets, so you can do historical tunings and various temperaments. And he's just doing classical guitars right now, but he's eventually going to get to steel string electrics. And I've always had a qualm with the guitar's intonation problems, and so like I'm just excited to hear this, and I'm wondering what you would come up with if you had like a very nice microtonal option on the guitar.
I feel like I have enough to worry about with
Mm-hmm.
the regular guitar. I don't want to like add a bunch of new parameters to my brain anytime soon. Once I get bored with this guy, I'll maybe try to expand. Sorry.
So I'm curious, beyond listening, what's up?
It says my internet connection is on. Oh no, it's fine. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. So I'm wondering about in terms of like listening beyond music. Like I saw a quote from you about influences, and you're like, well, whatever influence there is, it intuitively it manifests intuitively and instinctively. And I'm curious about like,
well, it's a nice philosophy. I'm not sure if it's true, but I assume it is.
It's something that I've hung on to, so I mean it's at least useful for me. But so like you look back at Flux, and Flux has all these song titles that sort of refer to like outer space, and I'm curious about what non-musical things influence your sort of general aesthetic, and like it could be reading, it could be whatever, just anything non-musical?
I mean, nothing specifically. I don't have any like deep hobbies or deep interest in any particular subjects. I do generally tend to read like novels of all different types. I probably, as far as like art, I favored the surrealists. Like Yves Tanguy is maybe Yves. Pardon my French. It's, maybe my favorite. So it seems to stimulate something deep in my psyche that is maybe a similar thing that I'd like to try to express through music.
Mm-hmm.
Roberto Mata, who's I actually used his work for one of my record CD covers. It's another one of my favorites. Since you asked me that directly, I can't really, think of anything specific. But I'll go back to like everything is an influence, and maybe some things because of what you're predisposed to, some things stick more than others. Maybe you just have to get around to like finding those things and having them stimulate and inspire you.
Gotcha. Cool.
But basically, what I'm thinking about when I write or play, I'm just dealing with the materials in front of me. I'm not thinking of expressing anything, sending a message or anything. I'm just attending to the materials that I'm starting with. And I feel like if there is a message there, or if there's an emotional import there, it's going to come out if I just tend to the architecture of what I'm trying to do. Like I don't have to try to manipulate it or contrive it. That's my theory anyway. So I never think about like what emotion do I want to express. I don't care about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the emotion is going to be there anyway. Like everyone is an emotional being. So if you tap into your creativity, that's gonna be expressed anyway. If you're attuned to yourself.
Gotcha.
And also, emotions inspired by music are unique to music. They're not, they're not like simplified, like happy, sad. You could be moved to tears by a piece of music, but you don't necessarily. It's not necessarily because it's sad or poignant or anything that you can really name, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the mystery of it. You've got to just enjoy the mystery. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
That makes sense. We're getting up here on an hour, and I want to respect your time. So the last few questions I have are basically, can you tell us about what it was like working with Paul Motian and anything you took away from him?
Well, I mean, for one thing, he was, before I met him, he was one of the most important band leaders and drummers. As to me, as a listener, his quintet, especially this quintet with Bill Labano and Bill Frisell, and Schuller and Jim Tepper, and anyway, my point is, I was super into Paul Motian, and then so it was kind of amazing to actually get to play with him and get to know him. I mean, what I took away from that is how strong of a musical personality he is. Like, he sort of projects his vision of music through his drum set, through his entire band. Like, whatever band he has, it still sounds like a Paul Motian band, no matter who's playing. Mm-hmm. And even no matter like what material you're playing, like, it doesn't even have to be his music somehow. Everybody just knows that this is like a Paul thing. And he's also always like so supportive, whether he's playing time, which like nobody played time better than him, or he's just painting. He was very intuitive. He was also, as you know, he's kind of, you know, was kind of a lighthearted guy. I mean, he was like deadly serious about music, and it was really like quality was really important to him. Like, he just wanted to put forward the best thing possible at all times, and I respected that a lot. He's also had like tons of energy. He's always kind of like up. I mean, he can get cranky once in a while, but he's generally a positive guy, and you know, up like through his 70s, he was just like tons of energy. It was inspiring. All of us.
Is there anything about his coffee habits you can share?
His what?
His coffee habits?
I don't remember that he even drank coffee. He may have. No, but
maybe that's his secret. Or was.
Yeah. No, I'm not aware of Paul Motian and coffee and the relationship there.
The other question I'll end with, I guess, is can you tell a little bit about anything you took away from recording Black Star with David Bowie in a similar vein to Paul Motian?
Well, I'll say that it was a completely enjoyable experience. Like, it was, like, aside from just like the thrill of recording with David Bowie, which has been a fan since I was like 11 years old. He and Tony Visconti just provided a really supportive, really great environment for us all to create. And he, you know, the reins were very loose. Whatever we wanted to, you know, if we had ideas to experiment. But I went in one day and just kind of recorded guitar parts on all the tunes. Like, I was only there for a third of the session. Like, it was done over 3 weeks, and I just came in for the last week. So a lot of stuff was done already. And there was one day where, you know, it was just like, you just come in and just play, just come up with parts over all these different tunes. So it's just like improvising over, you know, and some stuff was kept, a lot of stuff wasn't kept, but it was just, it was all in the spirit of experimentation. It's very supportive. And I liked how, even though he had a very specific vision for the record, he trusted us enough to not micromanage at all. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was great. It was a great week. I mean, it was literally 1 week of my life. It's just spent. So, but it was a good one.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I think that can conclude this interview. If you'd like, okay. Any other things that you want to say before we sign off?
No. But thank you, John. I appreciate I really appreciate your interest.
Good. Thank you for making awesome music. I guess I'll talk to you in the future.
Okay, take care.